All right, I'll try to be as enthusiastic and passionate than the last speaker, despite the fact I'm a banker. So I'll try to bring some good ideas on the screen and in my speech. I'm not there to sell my story and sell my stock. I'm there to share the way the banking industry is looking at the mining sector, and probably to share the checklist that we have on our side. You see the title of the presentation is quite simple, dirt, debt, and dividend. We believe that the reason for success is that to make sure that the three, dirt, debt, and dividend, the three aspects, share their checklist for success. You have a lot of very good GOs and technical teams, and they have their own checklist for success. You have a lot of very good investors, shareholders, CEOs, and they have their own checklist for success. And then you have the debt providers, and we have our own checklist. The idea is to make sure you don't wait for the last minute to get to know that checklist. You have to compare and start early your process and make sure you do everything from the start right. So I will give you a quick update on the debt market because we all think that the debt market is dead. The equity market has been difficult. There is a belief that the debt market is still dead. I will give you a quick update, and then I'll move on to more the way the banking industry is looking at the mining project, and I will share with you the checklist that we have on our side when we go to credit committee. Okay, the debt market has been impacted by a variety of factors. You know that the banking industry is facing a lot of headwinds, regulatory constraints, balance sheet constraints, higher political risk environment, limiting the appetite of some banks on some of the countries. Liquidity costs going up, due diligence requirements on the compliance side, on CSR topics. That's not a new part of the process, but that's getting more and more important within the way the banking industry is looking at the sector. You have lower prices in parallel, so that doesn't help. You have a lot of question on, okay, is it the right risk return? Is the mining industry, is it an industry the banking want to do more? There have been a lot of internal debate within the banks, and that's not only BNP Paribas, but the mining banks have been looking at the sector in greater detail. And the consequence you see on the top right chart, there's been a strong decrease on number of mining deals being financed, both in terms of size and number over the last 3 years. And the chart at the bottom left shows you that the average maturity of the deals has been reduced as well. In the past, it was quite easy to tap the debt market for 5, 7 years, up to 10 years money. Over the last 2, 3 years, the liquidity has been scarce, and the average life of the debt financing is probably more in the 3 to 5 range estimate. So that's new, and you have to take that into account. Last but not least, on that chart, you see the trend of the debt market is more focused on the refinancing at the moment. That's the blue part of the chart, while the capex development, the gray and the orange for the project finance, has been reduced dramatically as well. Meaning that we probably losing some expertise in project financing. We're good at it because we spend time on deals and projects, and if we have one success, we'll be good for the next one. If there are no new project finance in the market, the banks will lose the expertise. You see that some of the banks have closed their mining teams. The number of banks or number of funds with mining expertise is reducing. And when you're going to go to the market to get your debts down, you're going to have a small list of expert players. So that's where we stand. A quick summary on how, again, ourselves on the debt side, we see the challenges and opportunities of the mining sector. First of all, there's been a change which is good for us. The mining companies are moving from a volume approach to a quality and a margin approach. So they are targeting smaller projects, smaller capex, smaller or shorter construction periods. At the end of the day, you have probably more certainty on the funding sources, and you reduce the complexity of the project. The big names, you name them, Anglo, Barrick, Newmont, they have been reducing their number of assets, divesting part of their non-core businesses, reducing the balance sheet. So that had an impact as well, but that's a positive impact in terms of credit appetite or credit strength of the players. Obviously, the FX and the fuel price had a strong impact, especially in Africa, for instance, or in emerging market, and that's positive, and that's a positive thing that we see on our side when assessing the credit of the mining players. And on the other side, you have a new thing that says, okay, mining, that's part of the real industry. So we as a banker, we have to finance the real industry. So that's why we're imposing new CSR requirements. So don't complain too much. I think the reason for the banks to impose or to force the due diligence on CSR topics is because we believe that's good for the companies, that's good for the planet, and we trust that mining is part of the real industry. On the other side, political environment has changed a lot. You name the countries like Turkey. We've been doing a lot of stuff in Turkey. We're a bit more careful at the moment. West Africa, we're still very active. South Africa, you saw that last week the announcement of the mining minister. So political risk environment changing a lot, and higher risk doesn't help the debt market. On the pure financing aspects, I think it's fair to say that the debt market has been difficult for the juniors, while the debt market was waiting for it. So the equity and the debt piece has to work together now. In the past, the junior mining companies, they were tapping the market in Toronto or in Perth every 6 months for $20 million, and then they were just waiting for the last minute to engage with the debt providers. We believe that we need to form a common discussion. That's the reason of my presence today, and that you get to know how the debt providers will be assessing the project in probably 2, 3, 5 years, but at least you take that into account now. Okay, quick summary of the funding sources. So that's really a snapshot of the current debt environment for the mining sector. I have 4 categories of funding sources. The first one, commercial banks, and you know them, the European banks with expertise in the commodity sector, BNP Paribas, Société Générale. You have the Australian like Macquarie, the South African as well, the Canadian players. Commercial banks can go up to 7 years. Beyond 7 years, that's going to be tricky. The pricing will increase, or there will be no appetite at all. The drawback of that liquidity is that you have to follow the due diligence requirement of the banks. Then the second part, and that's something pretty new, we call them the new funding sources or the non-bank finances. That's something that came in the market over the last 2 to 3 years. Royalty companies, streaming companies, private equity funds, mining funds. They're bringing what? They're bringing the expertise, they're bringing liquidity, and they're bringing the speed of execution. So for us as bankers, these are real competitors. They move fast, they do deals quickly. You saw the deals announced by Orion Mine and BlackRock in Ecuador with Lundin. It's a full package. They do that with probably lower due diligence requirement than the banking industry, but they provide a full package done. They have done the same in Armenia with Lydia Mining, and they provided a full package, debt, equity, stream, offtake, everything. They can go up to 10 years. Then if you want to add some political umbrella in the structure, you can move to the discussion with the export credit agencies, more on the back of the capex and the sources of equipment. Korea Exim, for instance, Finvera, US Exim, EDC will provide cheap money for the long term. And last but not least, you have the DFIs, a bit scary sometimes by the number of due diligence requirements that they impose on the companies, but working with the IFC, World Bank, with the African Development Bank sometimes can help mitigate the political risk in some countries. We have done deals in Guinea, Conakry on the bauxite, and I can tell you that having IFC on board was a great reason for the success. Okay, last slide was the funding sources. Now on the financing structures, basically you can, when you go to the market, you have 3 ranges or 3 types of financing structures. The first one is the one you know probably, the more project financing for juniors. That's where really the expertise in the market is. And for junior mining companies, you can easily raise at the moment $200, $300, $400 million. We've done this in Mexico with Torex. We've done it with Rox Gold in Burkina Faso. We are looking at it with Gold Road and Guerrilla Mining in Australia. So that's really on the market, available for mining companies, and the pricing is quite cheap. 5-year money will cost you all in 5% probably. For the larger sponsor, like Rio Tinto and the big project in Mongolia, you can raise a couple of billion, and we have been doing the Oyu Tolgoi financing for the last 5 years. Then moving to the more corporate debt part of the financing structures. There, that's more for the existing players, like the First Quantum of the world. It's not a pure plain vanilla financing. It's more a structured facility. You can raise probably a couple of billion as well in the market, especially if you have development capex or expansion that you want to put in place, and the banks will be quite keen to finance this. And last but not least, that's more on the M&A front. That's where probably the big banks like Citibank, HSBC, Barclays will be joining the mining sector. That will be in support of the big M&A transaction like the one with Sibanye Gold and Stillwater Mining that we did earlier this year. You see that there is a but at the bottom. Oops, sorry. We believe that for juniors there's still a funding gap between the time you have the full fees and you raise your equity to finance the fees, the feasibility study, and the time you're ready to start production. You have a lot of CPs or permitting process to wait for, and sometimes the mining companies are just waiting for the government, for the equipment to come, and there is a funding gap that for the moment has not been addressed properly. That's a summary of the timetable and for mining projects. And really the point here on my comment is the fact that we are not working in sequence. The project finance discussion can start right at the time of the project development. Once you have a good idea of, okay, what's the project? Do you have a point on the map, location, a couple of figures in terms of size of capex and production? It's very good that you can start the debt discussion, even though the funding will come at the last part of the process. So that's really the message. That part of the timeline is where probably the CEOs has to be smart enough to talk to the debt and the equity providers. Okay, the to-do list. So that's quickly the to-do list of the credit committees. When I go to credit committee presenting a mining project, that would be the question. Okay, where is the company in the country? Do they have access to infrastructure, power, water? How they compare with peers? Key metrics. I don't want to go into details of complex elution circuit or work index. Give me just the grade, the volume, the cash cost, and that's it. Management and staffing, and I think that's critical as well for you as investors. Who are the guys in front of you? Is it a good team? Are they working well together as well? That's a good reason for success. Then the second part is to make sure the company has started everything a bit early, not waiting for the last minute to prepare the document for the banks. So going into the detail of the CSR aspect, technical, do you have a technical report to share with the banks? The banks will fund only at the to-be reserve stage, but we're quite keen to be discussing the financing even before that. Next one, and that's important as well, the bank are a bit scared when there is a company changing its strategy or its mine plan or its name every 2 years. So we like consistency, we like a clear vision and a consistent strategy, and that every year we hear the same story. That's quite important for us. If you tell me that you're going to go to the market in 2019, don't change that or don't come before, because I'll be suspicious. And as you progress, and that's probably the fourth point, as you progress with the equity story and the development of the project, talk to your banks, talk to the debt providers, talk to the funds, and just tell them your story as well, and see how they react and see how they see the market, what are the terms available, even though that's going to be in 2, 3, 5 years' time. That's constructive for you, and you can share that with your equity investors as well. And the last point, obviously, if you want to build a small mine, you don't want that big truck there. So don't try to be fancy or add some complexity to something that's already sophisticated. Be simple. As a CEO or as a CFO, you want something that you can explain to the shareholders. If you go for hedging, then make sure you understand how it works. If you go for a stream, make sure that you can explain to your auditors and to your shareholders as well. Keep it simple and keep it close to what you know. I won't spend too much time on that pros and cons on project finance. You know that project finance is a very good way of sharing risks. It can be slow, it can be costly in terms of due diligence. At the end of the day, you can leverage the asset, you can go up to 70% debt probably, and as I mentioned, you can raise, at the moment, USD for 5 years, around 5% all in. All right, I'll finish up on probably BNP Paribas and the setup. So I'm part of the mining team. We have a global franchise of 25 people. We do have the expertise in the field. We do project finance, but not only. We do acquisition financing, we do structuring, and we're more than happy to provide free services and free advice and talk to the companies, even though it's not the time when you need the debt to be put in place. Important to mention, we have a strong presence in West Africa, and we go there. I'll show you on the picture. Yeah, I'm not collecting the interest. That's not the way we're collecting the interest, but we go on the mines. We visit the countries, we know the countries. That's critical as well as debt providers. We're not just lending money out of London or Paris on the basis of an Excel spreadsheet. That's it, I think. That's.
Yeah, I gotta keep. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you. That was just Roxgold, a name you probably know. That's one of the case study, and I think a good example of success for a small but simple and nice project financing. Thank you for your attention.